Hello out there, and welcome to Future Imperfect. It is I, your Lieutenant Commander of this, I think we're a Constitution-class vessel. I am Lieutenant Commander Mike, the Birdman Dub, but I am not alone as I trek through the tattered remains of Star Trek Picard. That's right, guys. We are finally going to wrap up our thoughts about the finale and the series as a whole here on This Week in Geek and the Geekcast Radio Network. Of course, I am taking control of this because it's what I do occasionally. Occasionally, they put the emergency command hologram. That's right. I'm a hologram today. The real Mike Dodd is not available today. But we have Captain Steve Megatron Phillips on deck as well.
Hello.
And we have joining us in our little flotilla, kind of back in his own little garbage scow ship. We also have a special guest on the show. So if we can get this into a Star Trek adventure book at some point, it would make us tremendously happy. We are joined with the man in Kitchener.
Me, Alex. Hello. That was a weird introduction. What are you doing?
Well, the weird joke, before I get our little guest introduced here, is Alex often jokes with us on Future Imperfect, were he to exist in the Star Trek universe, he would be commanding a garbage scow, because you know what? In the future, people still got trash, so people still got to dump stuff off in the future. Hell, look at the Malon and Voyager. They were the embodiment of this. So you do have your own ship, Alex.
I believe I said I would be basically Molly made in space.
So, of course, the entrepreneurial ship of you. I don't even know what we've called your vessel yet, but that's a little side canon. But the big important thing to talk about this episode is we have a guest for the first time in a little while. We have a freelance writer on the show who's written for such lines such as Battletech, which is the 31st century warfare game from Catalyst Game Labs, and from Modiphius's very successful Star Trek Adventures line, most recently having released the Star Trek Delta Quadrant book. We have Aaron Pollyea, who will be joining us for this episode. So everybody, welcome aboard.
Hello there.
Guys, it has been a fantastic time preparing for this episode. The only joy I've gotten out of these last 11 weeks of Captain Picard, and I know the show is only 10 episodes, but it's been 11 weeks. I actually already did an episode about this with Nerds of the Third Power, where I raged out at Dr. Gonzo. Let's see what happens when I assemble this crew together for this mission, because, oh boy, have I got thoughts. But I wanted to bring an expert onto the show because Aaron and I have been bonding, which we actually got introduced via a mutual friend, Justin, over at terriblewarriors.com, which he interviewed Aaron about Star Trek Adventures and I think RPGs in general a couple months ago. And me and Aaron have just been exchanging messages, and I found out Aaron was a writer on Battletech, which is one of my favorite lines. And then I found out he was doing stuff for Star Trek Adventures, writing mostly the technology for the ships and whatnot. And just a really interesting friendship has formed, which would always begin around... And it would always begin with us kind of ranting about the latest episode of Picard. And I'm glad things have evolved and we've just began talking back and forth. So having someone who knows the canon like the backside of their hand is a fantastic addition to this show, because Picard is a series that it's a lot to unpack. Now, the series has received mixed from what I can see online. Some people on my personal Facebook love the show. Other people, such as former host from Space TV up here in Canada, which is now CTV Sci-Fi, are not pleased with it. In fact, they tuned out after episode 5, I want to say. Although I do want to read one particular quote that someone wrote about Star Trek Picard, and that'll be my thoughts summed up, because I'm going to let you guys go at it, because I've just spoken about this enough. But this comes from Johan Vasquez, the guy that wrote the Invader Zim comic and cartoon. He says, and I quote from his Twitter, dated the 13th of March, "Any hint or charm or genuine thoughtfulness in Star Trek Picard feels weird and out of place tonally, like a party clown doing something actually funny before Craig shits himself, blows his brains out, collapses to the floor, and explodes." This is how I also feel about Star Trek Picard, because anything that seems like it was clever or smart, you then realize, hey, that's weird and that's out of place here, because Star Trek Picard is a mess. I now leave the floor open to you, my crew. Let me know. Let's get started.
I guess I can start.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good summation. Every time that I found that there was something Star Trek happening in the show, it felt extremely out of place.
Yep.
Because overall, the show wasn't Star Trek. As I was saying before the show to everybody, I had gone through each one of these episodes twice to write notes down, and it was a slog through it. And I have no problems watching, Voyager's Threshold, for example, or Spock's Brain. Those episodes are terrible. We can probably all agree on that. But I would much rather watch those than this. Those are much more Star Trek than anything that we see in Picard. Yeah, it's shocking. Shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I made the prediction with Steve and Alex in our last episode, like, we're gonna get a Picard's brain moment in the finale, and wouldn't you friggin' know it, it happened. And Steve and Alex thought there would be all these clever callbacks to canon, because there might be.
I said it would be great if there was. I said
betrayal.
My prediction was, I said they would go one of two ways. Either they do the stupid thing and do Picard's brain, or they do what you would expect them to do, which is Data returns in new body and then sacrifices himself a second time. And then what we ended up getting was a mixture of both.
Well, what's funny is the whole thing with Data is, I kind of guessed from the beginning when we started hearing about the show that they were going to bring Data back as a hologram. And they did. Yeah. However, the implementation was crap.
After the second episode, when they specifically said, hey, Picard, you're dying, I thought, okay, that's it.
That's how they're going to end it.
Well, no, I actually thought immediately, since they've already been talking about a season 2 of Picard, they have to save him. And since they brought it up right at the beginning of this season, that he's going to have to die and get a new body. So that means they're going to have to find a Sung-type android and download him into it. That's what's going to happen to allow the series to progress past this first season. I mean, I wasn't 100% convinced of it by episode 2, but by episode, let's say 9, when they finally get to the android planet and we see that golem body, oh yeah, Picard's going into that. There's no doubt anymore.
Well, and I think it's hilarious how he goes from like whiny, crotchety, old Picard, and then within seconds of being in the new android body, the golem body, he's like back to classic Picard. Like, he's got the energy, he's got the pep in his step. Like, I think it's funny that all of a sudden he's that way again.
He doesn't have the balls to call everybody out on their crimes still. Like, hey, you're a murderer, you're a mass murderer, you need to go to jail, and you just about killed every living sentient being in the galaxy. Something needs to happen here. But no, he can't, he doesn't have the spine for that.
The show had the classic ending from like every cartoon or family movie where everybody just laughs and freeze frames. That's basically how it ended.
Yeah.
Or high fives, they jump.
I hated that ending.
God, yeah. Oh, the ending was terrible. The ending was terrible. I should actually read to you guys my ending.
Please do.
Yes, please.
Okay, I said, hey, look, there's 2 epilogues, but the thing that happens before that to finalize the episode, if I had to rewrite it, I would have said that the Borg cube is fixed. They are able to fix the Borg cube. Seven plugs herself in, and with the assistance of the rest of the ex-Borg, they're the ones that actually go up along with Picard to attack the Romulan warbirds that are up there. Warbirds, and I put warbirds in big quotes. The Borg actually are then used, unlike being completely dropped like they were in the actual episode. Anyway, the cube puts up this big fight, but the large number of Romulan vessels are just too much for it in the end. It takes a huge amount of damage. They don't have enough drones on it to continue to fix it. The drones are a completely separate thing because remember, guys, drones survive in vacuums. So when the Romulans blew them all out into the vacuum, Seven could have just beamed them immediately back on board because she had control of the cube. Anyway, the cube puts up this huge fight. The Romulans are too much for it, and it starts to re-enter the atmosphere again. That's when 40 to 50 Starfleet vessels of different classes drop out of warp, and a couple of them immediately tractor beam the cube while opening up on what's left of the Romulans. The communications opens up on the bridge of the La Serena, and it's Admiral Janeway. She comes on screen and she says, I never thought I'd be saving a Borg cube, but I was told that people needed our help. Picard, hold on, we'll clear the orbital space. Seven, we'll catch up later over coffee. Janeway out. So Admiral Janeway on board a Sovereign-class USS Voyager NCC 74656-A, and her escorts start plowing the field. That's great fan service, right? That would have some really dramatic fist pumping from every fan, and it would make sense. All right, so we have that happen, but Picard dies, and Janeway is there to comfort those that are grieving, talking about how she had to handle all the deaths on her ship. She's the one that carries Picard's body back to Earth for burial, draped in the Federation flag. So I have two epilogues that are after that. That's kind of like, hey, we go to credits, and then we have two epilogues. On the android planet, the first one, a new treaty is being signed between the major powers, undoing the ban on synthetics and giving them full rights of citizenship anywhere they may be, and they can be citizens to the Federation, no matter where they are. Commander O is arrested, and the surviving Romulan Zot-Vash ships are being towed out of orbit by Romulan Navy vessels. There probably would be some Romulan executions by the Tal Shiar. I would even have like some sort of Romulan Imperial officer, say, if we had these ships during the evacuation, my wife could be alive today, you Zot-Vash bastards. A small speech by Soji about how the Federation had lost its way through fear, but confronting fear has always been what has made people stand taller and come out more into the light of unity. The androids specifically delete the information out of their brains about how to build that giant beacon thing to bring back evil robots. Not that the evil robots don't know where we are now. That's just kind of dropped as well in the actual episode. As that whole scene ends and the first epilogue ends, the camera pans upwards to show the Federation flag fluttering in the breeze of a distant thunderstorm, hinting at troubles on the horizon, but showing peace and understanding for now. And then the second epilogue would be on Earth at Chateau Picard. It's the aftermath of the funeral for Picard, and dignitaries from all over are slowly leaving. Riker, Troy, their daughter, and Worf are standing together, clearly having been crying except for Worf. Their kid is rubbing her ears and trying to smile at Worf. I thought it was great, she says. I thought it was a great tension breaker when you screamed like that. Worf shakes his head sadly. No, I was telling the afterlife to prepare for a true warrior to appear among them. Quick cameo, but they walk off together. The camera pans away from the group as they start to walk back to the chateau, and we see Picard standing under the tree, tears on his face as he sits down on the ground. Data appears, just kind of out of nowhere, and puts his hand on his shoulder. Captain, do not grieve for yourself or for me. The journey is just beginning. Picard looks up into the face of his loved friend, and he stands up, straightening his tunic, and they disappear in a puff of light and noise that has a remarkable similarity for the cue. Fade to black. That's my rewrite of the ending of the last episode that I think would have been far better, and it took me 15 minutes to think of. Sorry for babbling.
It certainly would have been more entertaining than the Reapers from Mass Effect show up for all of 30 seconds and the same copy-pasted ship.
And if you were going to... the copy-paste thing is what got me. But
that's what got me, too. They all look identical.
Even, like, on TNG and DS9, they had the ability to put, like, 2 or 3 ships on screen.
Well, yeah, and they had you could see hundreds of ships there, but they were variations of ships that they had models for, whether it was the Excelsior Reliant class or just a bunch of old starships, Nebula, Galaxy.
It just to laziness.
If you wanted to have, a cheap, fairly easy cameo to come back to help Picard from, let's say, what is left of, I guess, whatever government the Romulans have or had, you could have Dina Meyer. You could have her come back from Nemesis as Commander Dinatra.
Yeah, you could.
And then
you could have had Sela there too for the Tal Shiar.
There's a few things they could have done that would have been easy, cheap, and simple.
It would have been much more satisfying.
But that would mean the writers would have to be clever, and they are not.
It would also mean the writers would have to have. It seems to me like they have a general idea of what they're doing. Obviously, they have to have a little bit, but it almost feels like they didn't go back and watch anything. And it's like they were given a few pages or a summary of the series, and they're basing it on their thoughts and like, well, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? Those aren't the questions that you should be saying, though. It shouldn't be, wouldn't it be cool if he did this? It should be, what would they do?
Yeah, let's give them a situation and how would these characters act? No, I agree. And the laziness isn't just with the writers, it's with the special effects team. Obviously, we already talked about the duplicated ships. But, I mean, there's the really good example is how many times do you see a Discovery era shuttle, and how many times do you see a shuttle from Next Gen, which was only 20 years previous? I actually know. I took notes on this.
All right.
You see Discovery shuttles 6 times, and you see Next Gen shuttles, none. The best example is a very nitpicky example of bad special effects, but it shows the laziness. And I will point. I think it's in the second episode, and it's when La Serena's in orbit of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It's nighttime over Europe, and they're kind of over the Nile Delta, and you see all the city lights on Earth. Well, the thing is it's city lights that are modern city lights. I think I pinned it down to 2018 because you can see lit up oil rigs in the Persian Gulf, like in the middle of the Persian Gulf. You can see that. You can see the effects of the Syrian civil war on the light patterns in Syria, and it's clear as day. And I compare that to the time, if you've ever watched The Expanse in this last season, they had a half a second shot of Earth, from orbit. And there was so much thought put into that shot because they had to figure out, well, Earth isn't going to look the same as it is today because of all the sea level rise and all that in that show. And they must have spent a week or two at least making that half a second special effects shot that my wife and we paused the TV right there and said, my God, look at all the detail in this. And you can look at that image and have a story told just from this half a second. And it was
the Orville does a better job of showing what Earth would look like.
Yeah.
The Orville definitely puts a lot more thought into it than any of the Kurtzman Star Trek era.
Well, the Orville also has writers from Voyager, DS9, and TNG on it.
That is true.
There's passion and there's care. They're not just there to make a buck or save a buck. They're there to tell a story. And yeah, it's upsetting. What I think about Picard is makes it so bad is that it had the most potential for something amazing, for something glorious, but it fell so far from that.
Yeah, I would definitely be inclined to agree because Picard is probably the most beloved captain of the franchise. I would even I think you could put a pretty good argument even above Kirk because we got a chance because we got a chance to see a fully realized character, and their journey wasn't complete after Nemesis. Again, you could make an argument, but this should have been something glorious. This should have been a return to form. This show had money behind it, which means it could tell a story that it wanted to. However, as Alex said, this is something that had a lot of thought put into it, and it was very hastily written with not a lot of care put into it. So that being said, I'd like to open this up again to the floor. Where did the season stumble? Because as we've done our little examinations of individual episodes, we've determined there are at least 3 or 4 filler episodes out of a 10 episode series. What were plot points that were hyped up that were never used? What plots could have been dropped entirely? And what ultimately happened as we got to the finale of Picard?
I'll go first just quickly. I would say it faltered right in the writing stages of the first 2 episodes because there's articles that have come out now talking about how in the original draft they already had their ship assembled and were in space at the beginning of the second episode. And we didn't get that till the end of the third. And even then, the whole crew wasn't there yet. It felt like they had initially intended this to be the equivalent of like a 2-hour TV movie or maybe a 3-hour miniseries, which probably would have fit this story better. If you had been able to split this into 2 parts, let's say you release part 1, now, and then part 2 in like July. And they could have done, a 1.5 hour, like 2 TV movies to complete the story, and it would have been much more concise. And I think people would have complained less because there would have been less time for them to make stupid mistakes.
I'll agree with that. I think they stumbled immediately too. I think that as well that there is most of the series you could completely take out and not lose anything. And as much as I enjoyed some parts of it, the entire Borg subplot, everything that happens on the cube can literally be removed. Because
it could be literally anywhere else.
Yeah, it has no bearing at all on the end result of the story. You could remove the entire 5th episode, Space Casino World. Anything with the Fenris Rangers, it just doesn't make any difference. With the Riker Troy episode, as good as it was compared to the other episodes, that could be removed as well.
The entire Casino World episode is what felt most like Sci-Fi Channel's Killjoys. It felt like really low budget. It looked low budget. Like, if you can't make it look realistic, don't bother at this point.
Like the disintegration.
Pink mist.
It should have been just a complete vaporize, not
it was all
like
the
a splatter.
holograms on the ship, like the ads. Like, I'm sorry, they never did anything that tactless. Like, it looked and felt like a cheap Sci-Fi Channel, something the Asylum would put together for the Sci-Fi Channel.
And that episode, and some people will go, oh, well, I really love that they brought 7 of 9 back and they did X, Y, and Z with her. They assassinated her character.
Yes.
They totally had her. Well, first of all, the death of Icheb was meaningless. There was no point to it. He was clearly in a Starfleet uniform, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that he was kidnapped and he was taken. There's probably Starfleet vessels around looking for him, right? They had been torturing him, right? There is no reason 7 had to just kill him. She could have beamed him back up to the ship, put him in stasis, put him in a medically induced coma, got on the subspace channels and said, Starfleet, I have Icheb here. He's going to die. You need to get him help. But regardless, you could put him in stasis. There was no reason to kill him. And what's the reason for these people taking Borg parts out of Borg? That doesn't make sense either. If you can beam somebody with those implants, you can replicate those implants. You don't need to torture anyone or take them out of Borg. You already have the patterns stored. So the whole revenge thing from 7 is just complete BS. And then she goes in and just starts slaughtering people at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not 7 of 9. I'm done. She needs to go to jail.
On top of that, I don't know what it is. It might just be me, but her acting has been subpar the entire show.
It seems like she phoned it in, which is really unfortunate, because at least during Voyager, it was the quest to humanity to understand individuality, to know what it's like to feel, to be empathic.
I feel like they told her more or less, you know how you played 7 all those years ago? Just play it totally different, like a new character, and just kind of let her go with it, like Space Ripley or something.
The show has a very weird tone. Sorry, that it.
Go ahead.
Any scene, the scenes where they're on a clear sound stage where there's not like a lot of CG around them, it's very competently shot. It doesn't have the same look or feel, obviously, of TNG, but it does have decent cinematography. But all of the acting and all the CG and everything just feels very, very low budget. It's like they spent a lot of money to do nothing on the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that feel out of place, out of touch, tonally, and obviously, as we've mentioned, within the writing. I don't know, just something has felt off about this Trek. It's like somebody's wearing Trek's skin. It's like Men in Black, where the alien steals that farmer's skin. It looks like a person, but you kind of know it's not.
It's like the It's like the fifth Die Hard movie. It could have been any other movie without just renaming the characters.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem, at least for me, is that I was expecting it to be Star Trek, and what I mean by that is that Star Trek generally has an internal logic and a consistency, not just across series or episodes or whatever, but if a transporter works one way, that is stated, it's generally going to work that way in future episodes, right? There's an internal logic and consistency. And you can make the assumption watching Star Trek that the world operates almost like our world, right? Yeah, there's better technology and people generally don't worry about the same worries that we have today, but the world still operates like the world. If you make those assumptions, then that's how Star Trek is. But this broke that in the first episode, like immediately broke that how is this world so wacky and just operating illogically and inconsistently inside its own framework? It really broke it. It really broke it immediately in the first episode.
Because they had 5 writers.
I mean, you could do something great with 5 writers. You honestly could. I shouldn't say that that's an immediate downvote, but you have to have the writers communicating with each other. You need to be able to say, this is what our coherent plot for each episode and the whole season is. And it's clear that they didn't do that because obviously they went back and did extreme reshoots. So it is clear that there are 2 separate sets of filming in this season. And there's a big disconnect between them.
Where do you think most of the reshoots happened?
Everything with Riker and Troy was reshoots. That's for sure. I think some of the stuff with Space Casino was probably a reshoot. I want to say that chunks of the last episodes, the 2-parter, are probably reshoots, but not all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that it really starts breaking down. I want to say a lot of the stuff in the Borg Cube is also reshoot.
Also, worst green
different.
screen effects in that I've seen in a show in 10 years. All the sets that were green screened in, it looks fakey, for lack of a better term. And actually, if you want to get somebody started, the set design is terrible. Look at the bridge. Birdman, go off.
Yeah, it looked, how would I describe it? It looks like a college set with a couple of gamer chairs put into it, which is really, it doesn't evoke 24th century to me. It looks like a low-rent asylum sci-fi style movie. And yeah, you can argue that there's different ship manufacturers, civilian, commercial, and military, but there would be a feeling like this belongs to an Earth-like species. Even the Bajorans and the Beta Z and any other Alpha Quadrant series, there's an aesthetic to their ship. This ship feels bland, boring, like
also,
Dollarama.
Would you ever buy a ship in the future? This is all theoretical. Would you ever buy a ship that has no manual override for controls and it's completely holographic in controls and how you do it? So
no,
that's insane.
like if you even see Riker's ship, it's still has manual controls.
That's because they reused the Discovery bridge, because that was on a reshoot when Jonathan Frakes was directing an episode of Discovery. That's what I've heard.
The more I hear about this show, the more it disappoints me, and it's so insane that, and as I mentioned, me and Aaron have been bonding over this show, which is a rather weird bond to have, about just how insane the show drives us. Yet people heap praise on this show. So let's talk about some of the net positives to come out of this. And I'll start to kind of give you an idea. So percolate your thoughts. I will say Patrick Stewart, when he's given something to do, when he's actually given agency to do something, he's good. To loop back to the Casino Planet episode, which is a big point of contention for people, he does a wonderful job in his eye patch. And I kind of wonder how much of that went off script. Like, they're like, Patrick, we trust you. Just make something interesting. And it worked. The moment with him and Hugh, very heartwarming, also spontaneous, and it worked. Other moments, I think even Alison Pill, who, as Girardi, had some wonderful comedic moments, but they felt out of place tonally.
Yes.
It didn't feel like it belonged in Star Trek. The guy that plays Rios, the hologram bit that he did in episode 8 or 9.
Great actor.
I love that.
That's funny. And it's needed to break up tension. Raffi, I don't recall any standout moments for her, but she was very consistent.
That episode, she was pretty good because she was interrogating all of the holograms, and they're like, "Nah, can't answer it for you."
Yeah, so she's at least
that's
consistent.
not even language.
I can't think of anything positive to say about the Romulan incest twins. Oh, Elnor felt weird.
Elnor's a complete waste of time. And, I feel bad because I think the actor did as best as he could with the material given, but there's no reason for that character to be in the show. None at all.
He served no purpose.
He was comedic Romulan samurai, which makes no sense.
He felt like a character that should have been on Stargate, not on Star Trek.
Well, he felt like a fan fiction character because, what if there's a Romulan samurai? And someone said, cool, make it happen. Yeah, he doesn't do anything. There's no resolution for him.
Well, in the Romulan twins, they actually said that the Narissa character had a very short and small part, and then they enlarged it based on the fact that they liked how she acted, so they made her part bigger.
She is a big bad sucked.
I think the actress did a good job, but I don't think the part she had was good.
No. It's like, I'm evil because I fuck my brother. It was weird.
Like implying it. Yeah.
And then there was the brother who was just, I'm Romulan's secret agent because
reasons.
That's what I do. I'm trying to think of other positive things. I did like seeing Riker and Troy came back because Frakes, you would never guess he stepped off the set back in 2004 for Nemesis. It was great. It was wonderful. Same with Sirtis as Troy. They both seamlessly stepped back into those characters.
That episode was great.
Or him making the pizza. It just made me think of that not so good, but I guess satisfying compared to this show's ending to Enterprise, where he, was interviewing everybody as
he's the chef.
Yeah, and he basically looked like that. He's gained maybe 30 pounds, and he's great, big deal. But he seemed to be having fun, and he seemed to be doing everything that he would do in character.
Well, and he guessed Picard's whole methodology and everything he's trying to hide from him because he's like he's served with him for 20 years. It's like, okay, I get everything that you're doing.
I was going to say, did you hear the interview with Marina Sirtis about that episode for her getting called back? That she I guess she asked if they had contacts for her when she got there, because Betazoids have black eyes. They don't have the iris, and they looked at her, I guess, without any comprehension of what she was talking about. And it turned out that she had brought her old ones that she had wore for Nemesis, and she
also brought her wig.
Yeah, and she had to use them because they didn't even think about it.
Wow, that I had no idea about.
Yeah, she was so in character, she remembered to bring her own stuff that she stole from the set of Nemesis.
Well, she's a professional.
Yeah, well, and she liked playing the character.
And I will say that everything that was very good about Picard was when Picard was dealing with somebody from Next Gen or other older Star Trek. Those were the scenes that stood out. Hugh, Seven, Troy, Riker. That's when the show shines.
Yep.
One of the best exchanges, and then I'll open up to the floor, is where Picard and Data finally have their goodbye. And when Picard says to Data, I love you, and Data says, that's a small but significant part of my memories, knowing that you love me. Now that I know that, please let me go. I don't want to live anymore. Let me complete this next journey that I should not have a completion to. And watching him age and rapidly die in Picard's sort of afterlife limbo thing was rather nice, and them playing Blue Skies over it was a nice bit. So I think the two parts of Picard that really stand out to me as outstanding is that exchange, because Brent Spiner, when he wants to bring his A game, be it quirky and funny as Soong or Data, he can do it. And the other exchange is almost anything with Riker, but more specifically when they're out by the pizza oven, just exchanging what's going on. And Riker says, let me guess, this, that, and the other thing is happening. And he flashes those pearly whites, and he's got that Riker smile and swagger.
Yep.
Those moments stood out to me. And then I guess let's hear from you guys. What are some moments that really made this series something special?
Oh, silence.
Stunned silence. Yeah.
I mean, there are good things in the show. I will fully admit there's good things, but I don't think there's anything that made this show something special, which is kind of shocking for me to say with a Star Trek show. Like, I can say things that made the animated series amazing. You know, I can say something that even the worst episodes of Voyager brought that made that episode amazing. But Picard,
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Nepenthe episode only for the fact that you had the return of Troy and Riker, and it didn't seem out of place, and Riker was very much on point, as was Troy. And Picard's like, I'm out of my depth. I need some help. And they're like basically telling him, be you, stop being this crotchety old man, like be Picard. And I think that it was kind of on point in mentioning that. And he did kind of do that for the rest of the episode, but then he kind of went back to cranky old man syndrome. And then for me, like most of the parts that really were something were when Riker shows up and Troy, where Hugh shows up, even though he got offed the way he did. Because I thought it was nice continuation of his story, kind of leading in the way that Picard kind of mentioned to him in the Descent Part 2. And then, I thought it was kind of hokey how this happened, but Riker leading the fleet, coming out of semi-retirement to lead the fleet. I just like seeing
two people on his bridge.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty ridiculous too. But I did like the fact that he was back in uniform and he was sitting on the command chair, more or less playing his poker face against the Romulans. Like, come on, give me a reason to shoot.
That was a great scene. I'll agree. That was a great scene up until you realize that Riker just let this giant war criminal just waltz away, free as a bird. She's the person that they now know, fully was behind the Mars attack and killed only 90,000 Federation citizens, which is utterly shocking to me that that's a whole terraformed world of Mars with stateside cities on the surface.
And then they mentioned that it's still burning and everything else, and then also caused the destruction of the Romulan people because Picard was trying to preempt that in the first place.
And she was the head of Starfleet intelligence. You cannot let her go with what she knows.
No.
You cannot.
But they did.
Yeah, because, he's Riker and he's got a grin on his face. And I was like, man, the thing that went through my mind in that scene was I saw Riker and I went, okay, awesome. And then I thought, oh, crap, Riker's got to die now because the Romulans are actually in the right here. Like, that was the thought that came in second to me. Like, the Romulans were right. That the synths were a danger. They just opened up the freaking portal. And Riker's going to get in the way of the Romulans actually stopping this universe-ending event, galaxy-ending event. And now Riker's got to die. Oh, no.
They opened the portal to third space. I mean, wait, that's not Star Trek. That's Babylon 5, because this whole show was basically scripts taken from Babylon 5.
I agree. I agree that scene was really good. It's anytime somebody from Next Gen or previous Star Trek series pop up and do something like they should, like their characters would, that brings a grin to your face.
Yeah, as far as new stuff in this, I would say the music was good. The sound editing was good. The sound effects were bad.
Yeah,
they didn't use. It didn't seem like they used any sound effects from the actual Star Trek library, and they tried to create new ones.
Yep. They did, and then it seemed like they didn't try and use much of them at all.
I mean, I heard old effects from like Next Gen, or even, believe it or not, TOS. I heard a TOS effect in there, which was kind of
Like
I think the tricorder, if I remember correctly, the tricorder that she was using, the old school tricorder, actually sounded like a TOS tricorder. Yeah. So I was like, that pleased me, but
it didn't look like a stage prop. It looked like a toy.
Yeah, it wasn't a high quality hero prop. Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've talked about things that we liked, what were the most egregious errors this series made? And then we'll wrap up with our final thoughts.
I'll go quickly just because I only have one basic thought. And it was, I went into this show thinking, watching bit by bit going, oh, they're basically trying to tell like the fall of the Roman Empire. They've, the Federation is stretched so thin with a major enemy that they were in a Cold War with forever. The Romulans gone. They now have to basically police and control so much more space than they can handle, that they're slowly falling apart. And I thought, okay, well, Picard has basically been languishing over on his own, not paying attention to what's happening in the universe. So he has failed to see that, you know, their empire essentially has started to hit the breaking point and they're falling apart, but they're pretending that everything's still okay. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a cool story to tell. And then they didn't tell that at all. So my biggest problem is, every time they set up a neat idea, they don't follow through. For instance, the most egregious problem I have with the entire show is how they find the planet. How they find
That's obscene, yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, so, you know, Riker's daughter, who I didn't care for how she was written, but that little girl was a pretty good actress. Basically text message somebody at dinner and goes, we found the place. And this mysterious captain that's been everywhere and is super old, even older than Picard, is never shown, never mentioned, never verified. They just magically know that's the place where they have to go. So my thought was, well, is that person going to turn out to be Q or something? Like,
they figured out that a planet that has lightning storms, right? Well, they say continuous lightning storms, but let's be fair. The planet had no lightning storms really when there were characters there, and has 2 moons. So how many planets do you think that androids that don't need a Class M environment to live on, how many planets are out there with 2 moons and have the possibility of lightning storms? This includes gas giants, by the way, because you could live on a big platform orbiting inside the atmosphere of a gas giant with anti-gravity, and it has 2 moons. And yet the first one that they find is the right one.
And it's literally, it's a text message. That's how they figured out where to go. A child was able to transcribe what they were asking, receive the message while they were eating, and then they didn't even question it. They didn't go to this captain and figure out how or why he would know. They just, he's an old, crazy old coot that lives down by the river.
And there's a Borg transwarp conduit that exits right in orbit too.
So the only thing, that's what made me think, I'm like, okay, is it going to be revealed that, like, you know, Riker didn't join the Q, is literally going to be that Q has been watching his family for 20 years and is sort of like a guardian angel to them? Is that how it's going to be explained? And then nothing, not even remote. I would have been pissed if that was the case, but it's nothing. It's the worst case of magically finding out how to get themselves out of a problem I've ever seen in a show ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this happens quite often in the show. There's lots of different.
Well, every episode they have to hit the same beats. Like they literally hit the same beats in every episode. There's no, like, even in the last episode, there's no like longing or leaving it to, like, technically they could end it right there and it wouldn't matter. Like, oh, the journey continues, whatever, you know. Whereas like Discovery at least made the attempt of, you know, in season 1 where, oh, we're being hailed by the Enterprise, you know, and then just kind of left it hanging like, okay, what do they need, you know?
So my thoughts, I think my main gripe with the series is there was so much wasted potential. Like we've discussed in this episode, the entire ex-Borg thing was put in for fan service, and that's pretty much about it. They just wanted people to be known that they were liberated Borg, and that's pretty much it, because they wanted to appeal to that wide fan base that sees the Borg as the ultimate Star Trek bad guy. And I'm upset we didn't use that as some kind of a metaphor for people who are oppressed and who have become free to do their own thing. I'm really disappointed they didn't take advantage to do a social commentary on that, because when Star Trek does something wonderful like that, expressing that political or social commentary, it's at its best. That's, I think, what disappointed me about Picard, is I didn't see a lot of that really intense writing. And considering television writing has evolved since the show first came on the air back in 1987, I'm disappointed we didn't get that somewhat more uplifting message. I wanted something that filled me with hope. I didn't want 24 with like phasers. And where it failed me the most is 7 of 9. I mean, it's no secret on the show, I'm a huge Voyager fanboy. And when they brought back 7 of 9, I wanted to hear a couple of throwaway lines about what happened with Voyager, what happened with her and Chakotay, and stuff that was hinted at.
And they throw in that she's holding hands with Raffi in the last episode.
Yeah, what the hell was that?
That whole scene where everyone is just miraculously like a couple and everything without any chemistry being built beforehand. They're like, well, you could insinuate it, but it's not.
I don't care about her sexuality. She can be gay, she can be bi, she can be straight. It does not matter. It's the point. It's a relationship that comes out of nowhere and isn't earned.
But it also feels like they just did, hey, let's take a Hallmark moment. Look, we have every type of possible couple we could possibly have, and every bond we've made. Look at this. It's like they tried to wrap it up into like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah, like that's my thing. Nothing feels earned in the show, other than maybe Picard, but just, I don't know. That's how I felt. So, Steve, your thoughts?
I don't know. I kind of agree that nothing was really earned in the end there. It would have been different if it was something like the whole Dax thing where the Trill symbiotes, they were male and female at one point, and then they, still had feelings for each other kind of thing from DS9. But like they have no history to even warrant that. And the same thing with Jurati, like she's a crazy like psycho murderer that, killed her previous ex-boyfriend, and yet Rios is like all over her. And, never mind that she was supposed to go to jail and for murdering somebody from the Federation. And then you have, Raffi and Seven just holding hands. It doesn't, all of it doesn't really make sense in that whole part of the episode. Like it honestly was a lot of throwaway just for the sake of saying, hey, look, we're inclusive, but it's not, it didn't add anything to the story. Like it wasn't like something that gradually built across the season. It was just ta-da.
And then you're stunned. Where did that come from? Well, wait a second. Yeah.
The only thing missing from this Hallmark ending would have been Raffi magically having her son and grandchild on the ship to hug at the very end, which her family had no purpose.
I'll say that where the series falls apart the most for me is generally how they tried to piece together the overarching story. It's clear that they had an idea, but they had no ability to actually weave that idea into points that made sense in each episode, like multiple points in each episode, and then connecting the episodes. Just constant contradictions in their plot points that they're trying to make. Most of my negative points that I have all revolve around the fact that the plot is either contradictory, there's a convenience that has to happen because the characters are suddenly stuck, or the characters suddenly act out of character, or the plot, the universe doesn't fit. The story is not fitting inside the universe, and it has to have something happen that just doesn't fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like they didn't have a series Bible written for it.
I think that's a very astute point. I think so. They probably didn't.
So I guess ultimately, as we come to the end of this show, would we recommend this even as a once watch through? Because this is this is a fairly exciting time for Star Trek. The fact that we finally got this series and it's been greenlit for, we just finished the first season. There are 2 more seasons confirmed. We have Star Trek Discovery starting its 3rd season, presumably this summer, though with the coronavirus, who knows. Star Trek Below Decks, which is the Nickelodeon animated series. We'll see what happens there. And could there be a 4th movie? We don't know yet. There's been talk about it for years, so we'll wait and see, I guess. What do you guys think? I myself say I think the series is worth a watch through once, but do not expect much. Simply because if you want to see what happens to these characters, quote unquote, in again, quote unquote, canon, it's a story. It's not a very good one. But it's not to say there isn't some good moments here and there. And that's the biggest problem with Picard, is it has some cool moments, but its big consistency is that it's inconsistent, which is, I think, the most disappointing, because this is a franchise which has, I would say, a pretty good pedigree of telling good stories when it wants to. And it's outshone by its contemporaries. If you guys have told me, the Orville has told some wonderful stories. Other contemporary sci-fi like Battlestar Galactica, even though you think about how old that is, 2004.
There's a new one of that coming out too.
Yep.
The Expanse, I swear by. I love The Expanse. And that's very far from what Star Trek should be, the utopian kind of hopeful stuff. The Expanse is pretty dark and down, but man, that show is really well written.
Well, let's put it this way. And this kind of speaks to this whole season anyway. Kurtzman and Goldsman, who worked on the first season of Discovery, which was atrocious and I hated, also worked on this show in heavy amounts with Michael Chabon. And the funny thing is I hated season 1 of Discovery, but season 2 was great because it lacked some of that influence and it had more of an uplifting tone and it made sense. Whereas this doesn't really. And when Kurtzman originally announced the show with Stewart, they more or less said that it would be its own thing, kind of elaborating that where Discovery is a bullet, the Picard series is a very contemplative show with its own rhythm, which I don't see it.
Say what? Did we see the same show?
You can't trust anything. You can't trust anything anybody that comes from J.J. Abrams' crew says or does, because they all lie, and all they do is reboot and remake and reuse ideas.
I would say that if I had to recommend to watch the show or not, I would say no. Not even a once through. There's no point to it. I mean, if you want to see characters that you loved do awful things and go against what you thought and hoped for them. And, maybe you shouldn't put your hopes on it, but it's still them doing awful things and making really bad choices. So it's not making you feel good. If you want to see Starfleet be assholes, if you want to see the Federation do the wrong thing, and if you want to see the quote-unquote antagonists for the show, the Romulans, actually be correct and right, and you feel like you need to root for the villains in the end, I think the show fails on any kind of storytelling that it's trying to do, and therefore it's just not worth watching. I honestly wish I had never seen episode 5 with what 7 ended up doing. I honestly wish I had never seen it.
Steve and Alex, what do you guys think? Is it worth a watch through once?
I would say it's worth a watch through once. It was not worth waiting week by week. They should have dropped the show out like a turd all at once and had us be able to binge it in an afternoon. Really. My younger brother, he's turning 27. He's somebody who never really watched Trek. He's very intelligent. He's a computer programmer by trade. He wasn't a big fan of Trek, but he did watch. I made him watch Encounter at Farpoint, All Good Things, and I think about 3 or 4 other episodes before he watched this. And then he had seen, sporadically through the years, random episodes of different series. To him, when he started watching this was his favorite show. And I almost feel like this is a Trek show for a younger generation that weren't Trek fans, but knew of Trek or had maybe heard of Trek. And they're like, they want to be a part of it now. And then as we went through it, he's like, this writing is really inconsistent. And he goes, overall, he enjoyed the show, but he said it was terrible ending to the point where we were laughing at the end. He goes, he said to me initially, he goes, Alex, this could have been a 2.5 hour movie. And he goes, it could have been just about the synthetics. And he goes, they could have made another 2-hour movie about the Borg, and that would have been fine. And he goes, also, he asked me, how long did they take to write this? I'm like, I think at least a year. Like, they announced it almost 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And it doesn't, like, they only really had, 5 sets for the entire show? They kept repeating over and over again?
Pretty much.
So...
redress things for Discovery.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, it couldn't have been that long to film, shoot, edit, and get ready. So it almost feels like, and half these people weren't working on any other show. So it's not a matter of scheduling. Like, it doesn't make sense to me where all the money went. So I don't know. I would say if you're a super huge Trek fan, avoid it. But it's also going to depend on what they do with season 2. Because if the rumors are true that they're basically at CBS doing a clean sweep of all of the people in charge of Trek, if that happens, it'll be interesting to see who comes in.
Now, where did you necessarily hear that?
It's been a while now, but it was popping up on a few different TV news sites, and the talk was, I know that they changed they changed showrunners. I think, was it 3 times now on Discovery?
Yeah, and they've changed it again for season 3.
Yeah, and the talk was they were going to do the same for Picard to handle seasons 2 and 3. Now, it's all going to depend. Are they going to film? If they film both seasons back to back, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, if they film like basically a 20 or whatever episode run, but I kind of get the feeling that we're going to have a situation where every season of each of these shows is going to have a very different tone, because there's no consistency with any of the writers. There's no consistency with any of the showrunners. The only consistency is they seem to get the same directors over and over again.
The direction isn't that bad. The cinematography isn't that bad. It's actually okay. And, Jonathan Frakes as a director is actually pretty damn good. So, I mean, that's not a problem. It's the writing and production in general of it.
Why don't we just call in, I don't know, some of the other showrunners? Ron Moore's too busy. He's doing a lot of his own stuff. But, I mean, back up a truck of money to him. Or who's the other guy from DS9? Guy with the goatee.
Is it Ira Bear?
Yeah. If you look up some of these people, they're not doing anything. I mean, they're semi-retired maybe, but maybe hire somebody who's...
I write Star Trek Adventure episodes for the role-playing game. Hey,
of course.
For a hotel room and food, It's...
Exactly, but if they're looking like... What they need is a strong hand at the top. They need to hire somebody specifically, because it looks like their entire CBS All Access network is hinging itself and hedging its bets on basically running 2 to 3 Star Trek shows a year, and then everything else they put on there, it doesn't get any views. So if they're really thinking this is where they need to make their network go, they should have somebody who's hired and their entire job is to just oversee Star Trek. And why not have somebody who had success previously do it? Or at least have it be 2 people, maybe. Somebody new with fresh ideas and somebody who knows what they're doing.
Actually has a passion for the universe.
Yeah, they better do it now, because like if they wait another few more years, some of these people are already in their 60s and 70s. So, get somebody that can still work to do it before they run because like if every single show they put out is going to be like this, very frenetic and like crazy all over the place, they're going to run their entire franchise into the ground.
I'd argue that they're pretty close to have done it already between Discovery and Picard. I mean, season 2 of Discovery was quite a bit better than season 1.
But it all hinged on having the Enterprise show up in Captain Pike.
It was all because of Anson Mount as Captain Pike. Like
totally.
The Telos 4 episode of season 2. My God, that was great.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome.
Every time there's a new character or something from the new series and they're trying to put some weird idea into it, like the Red Angel stuff was just to me, it was nonsense. It just made no sense in the end. But that's probably because they switched showrunners again. And
the Klingon time crystals, that was interesting, seeing the moral dilemma that Pike had to go through.
That was really good. That was really good.
Also, you're on a Starfleet, you're on a military vessel, you're working, you're on duty. Stop swearing.
That's not how professionals act.
If they're going to do swearing, because you can now, obviously, I don't care, I'm not a prude, but if they're going to do swearing, make it when they're off hours in their own quarters. Why is it that they're swearing on the bridge? Why is it they're swearing when they're like, and the swearing is contrived. It's not like it would. If you're going to say fuck, say it like it would naturally progress into the speech. They just seem to have added a word here or there. It's like, emphasize this word or say this, because we're going to get all the people going, oh my God, they swore. Whereas,
you mean like the Admiral?
Yeah, the Admiral in the second episode when Picard goes and sees her. I think it's the second episode, right?
Yep.
That when she's sheer effing gall, actually that felt okay, because there was a reason for her to be angry at Picard at that point. Really angry at him.
Yeah, he shot off his mouth in front of the media.
Yeah, he shot off his mouth. He's basically a disgrace to Starfleet for everything that he's done. Not right. I would say that it's wrongly that way, but she has every right to be furious at this guy.
But the delivery, that wouldn't be the take that I would have used.
Oh, no. I would have had her throw him out, though.
I know Mike really likes Tilly, but on Discovery, but the way she talks and the way she acts on any other vessel in the history of the show, she would not have made it to her position.
Yeah, she shouldn't be, like, is she crewman or is she an officer?
No, she's an officer. She was cadet, and then she's ensign now.
Is she an ensign by the end of season 2?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, that is not flying. If she was on my vessel, no, you are not moving beyond your current rank until you learn to smarten up.
Yeah, if they're going to swear on, like, Rio's vessel, it's like, okay, they're basically a bunch of space bums, right?
Yeah, they're ex-Starfleet. It's like Starfleet, Star Trek Renegades.
And then, and that is how I want to end this. The show feels like some rich person said, hey, I'll put up $10 million for you to make your Star Trek fan fiction show. And that's what it feels like.
Well, it feels like that's why Renegades got shut down, because it was a couple of the original series, basically a borderline ex Starfleet, sending a crew to defeat this force that had infiltrated the Federation. And I honestly love the premise of that much more than this. And they basically had to take the Star Trek and all of the Star Trek names out of it for the second and third episodes. And it was still infinitely more coherent than what we got here, which was basically doing the same thing.
When fan films are more coherent, make more sense, and are more Star Trek feeling, that's kind of sad.
Especially on a shoestring budget.
Yeah, on a shoestring budget.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Discovery. There was the Star Trek fan series that was trying to go on and tell the same thing of the season 1 with the Klingon War, and they had people that were from the original, and it still was going to be more coherent, but it got shut down immediately because then they went and stole the idea.
Oh, it will, not to mention, hey, let's just copy this video game's plot that nobody will ever figure out we did, and then we'll be embattled in a lawsuit because our entire show is basically predicated on the ideas of a foreign language video game that was made by one person.
Yep.
And we're going to have a prequel that involves the Klingon Empire invading and controlling a third of the Federation, and then it's never mentioned again. Like that's when the Klingons invade in Discovery. Like that's far worse than the Earth-Romulan War in the scale of what happened. Far worse, and it's just never mentioned again.
That's why, to me, I almost feel like Discovery is not in the Prime universe.
I agree. I've said to my wife and a couple other people when I've been discussing the show is that Discovery and Picard are not in the original timeline. They just can't be. You can't. I don't know. Discovery is just so far outside of what should be there.
Like, it's almost like Discovery is in the Kelvin universe, and then this is this the Splinter in the Kelvin universe of what happens?
I wouldn't say it's in the Kelvin universe, but it's definitely connected to Discovery, because remember when Picard goes into Starfleet Command, he looks up, and before he sees the Galaxy class, he sees a Constitution, but not the Constitution he should recognize. He sees the Discovery Constitution.
You would have thought it would have either been the one from Kirk or the one with the refit.
Yeah, because he should have, when I saw that, I thought, boy, Picard should actually say, what the hell is that? That's not the old Enterprise.
What a
Starfleet is.
If you wanted to have made the show better, that's how you could have started it. It could have literally been, this is a case.
That's not my Enterprise.
Well, no, a case of the entire universe has changed around him, and he didn't know it because for whatever reason he was chilling out on his, he's been chilling out at home, or. This whole show could have been entirely a simulation by Q to test him, and he was pulled into a different scenario.
One idea that I had was right in the first episode when Daj blows up, that this is all a near-death experience with Picard dying at this point, because there's no way he should have survived that first explosion. No. Everything else from there on is a near-death experience as he's dying.
So, with all these thoughts in mind, we hope you will write into the show. So, Steve, if the people want to reach us, how would they do so?
Well, they can reach out to us at feedback at geekcastradio.com or feedback at thisweekingeek.net.
And if you want to, and if they want to find you on the social, Steve?
At SCP-21.
All right, cool. If you are looking to hook and communicate with me and Alex, you can find us on Twitter at ThisWeekinGeek. Alex is maintaining that presence for us right now. However, if you do reach out to my personal Twitter, I will always respond to you. I'm just kind of taking it easy, posting more silly things and cat things than I have been normally. Just taking a mental break because Lord knows we could use it during this time. Aaron, I definitely want to thank you for taking time out of your exceptionally busy schedule writing for these various properties, and it's been an honor. We would love to have you back on the show to talk about what it's like developing for an IP such as Star Trek.
I'd love to be back. It's great to talk with people. I don't know. I guess I've been quarantined for far too long. I don't get to talk to people about Star Trek. Even when I hate the Star Trek, it's good to talk about it because it's still Star Trek in some way, and I have a deep passion for it.
Well, then I guess we will put a pin in that, and we'll try and get you on in the next couple of weeks. So look forward for that on the Geekcast Radio Network, and of course here on This Week in Geek. So for This Week in Geek's Future Imperfect, we have been
Steve Megatron Phillips.
I guess I'm just Alex right now because we don't have a title.
And I'm Aaron Pollyea.
And I've been your Lieutenant Commander Mike the Birdman Dodd, saying, live long and prosper.
In any case, see you